I was attracted to City University of London because of its diverse student body. However, my peers and I quickly realised that in journalism, there were very few fellow students of colour and even fewer staff members of colour. It has been challenging to navigate complex and sensitive matters around race and gender when you are the only person in the room who has personal experiences. We have felt isolated and like we didn't belong on our course, which has had a detrimental effect on our work. If City is truly dedicated to its pledge to stamp out institutional racism, it is important that they employ BAME members of staff, protect freedom of speech and encourage diversity of opinion.
I've never had a lecturer that's not white, and around 70% of my course is made up of white students. There was a huge disconnect with the patients that we worked with on placement, where the majority were ethnic minorities and immigrants. So many of them required interpreters or struggled to communicate what was wrong with them or their child. When speaking about our frustrations about how some of our colleagues on placements treated these patients, for example, ignoring them because they were difficult to handle or would take longer, it wasn't met with sympathy for the patients, but rather for the staff, with comments from lecturers such as, "Gosh, it does complicate things for us when they don't know English."
In a lecture theatre of around 100 students, I was accused by a lecturer of being unprofessional and making patients feel uncomfortable because I was wearing henna, or what my lecturer referred to as that weird brown stuff all over your hands. It was a highly embarrassing moment for me, and I seriously considered dropping out because I felt that I wasn't good enough.
I don't often discuss the difficulties I face on placement because I assume that my experiences won't be understood. My white male clinic tutor said to the room, "X, I received an email from your supervisor. There seems to be an issue with your clothing." Although very embarrassed, I also considered it to be an opportunity to discuss issues faced by Muslim women on placement, but I was quickly proven wrong. I was met with a deal with it attitude from my peers and the tutor. One compared my experience to her own, her having to spend money on hot chocolate. In the end, I had to spend my own money on buying disposable sleeves for myself because placements and universities do not have the knowledge or equipment to deal with it appropriately due to lack of diversity. A lecturer once said to us in a lecture, "I don't want to read one more dissertation on Islamophobia, it's overdone."
We were working on a group project and had limited resources as usual, so I asked the lecturer a question in front of my group and he replied, "You're thick, aren't you?" I've always been happy to engage with questions and answers in classroom settings, but after this my confidence took a genuine hit.
I've experienced racism at City in all its forms, from the structural and institutional racism based on policies and the way the education and curriculum are set out, to microaggressions and being dismissed, ignored about my capabilities, to being told by a white professor when challenging him about Britain's colonial past, "If you don't like it, leave." When it was formally investigated, I was gaslighted about my experience by another white senior professor who tried to convince me that it was just a misunderstanding.
I feel more discriminated by all the lecturers because I'm not white. They treat me different and think lower of me. They have said offensive words to me that's lowered my self-confidence. They would never have said it to a white person. This is the reason I hate uni.
I was working in a team of 3 Chinese students for some coursework on an IT module on our business course. I and the other students that I worked with were accused of plagiarism by our professor with very little reason or evidence. When we asked further questions, we were told by the professor that our work was similar to a file that had been submitted by someone 4 years ago, by someone who had already graduated, but we did not know. How is it that first-year students could find these alumni and get copies of their coursework? Was that file submitted by another Chinese student 4 years ago? How is it that we have cheated when we weren't even aware that that coursework question would have been similar 4 years ago? We were all very upset about this and emailed our professor asking for a conversation regarding the accusation of plagiarism. Our request was rudely rejected and we were told by them that they had closed this sad episode and that they didn't see how a further discussion would change anything. Added to that, when we pushed back, they also said, "I am pretty overwhelmed at the moment with marking and teaching, which means I am constantly working overtime just to keep up with the essentials. I'm not able to arrange a meeting with you." In my account, this professor assumed that a group of first-year Chinese students plagiarised and gave us no chance to know the details concerning the accusation. As a group, we felt racially discriminated and treated less favourably than other students on our course. We had saved each step of our coursework, had earlier versions with notes and mind maps, and proved that our coursework was in no way plagiarised. Based on this experience alone, I would not and will not recommend the business school to my friends or junior students in my high school back home.